Have you been unleashed?
Unleashed.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Horizon Advisors Unleashed podcast. This is Andrew Hendricks back again, your fine host with my fine partner, Ryan Cuss. What's going on, Ryan?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Busy weekend.
Busy weekend.
A little bit busy. Very busy. Rather be busy than not, as I always say. Heard me say it many times. We had a little bit of a fun weekend.
Yeah.
Myself and my wife Josie hosted a Halloween party for some friends, family, etc. on Friday night.
First annual.
The inaugural Henrik's Halloween party. I always wanted to have a Halloween party when I was younger. I thought my house, or our house, my parents could do it, but they never wanted to do it, which is fine.
I'm in that camp.
That's fine. You guys can be the losers. That's okay. I'll be the host. But it seemed like it went very well. Had a lot of people turn out. Everyone seemed to have a great time, so that was a lot of fun. That was Friday. Everything, and then Saturday was basically football and cleanup from the party. Which fortunately no breaks, no trouble, no nothing. So that's always good. So that was Saturday, and then Sunday,
Lions got a big one.
I was at the Lions game. Fortunately, the Titans aren't the most strong team, I would say right now. So, but you still got to win the game, and you got to not get complacent. So that was fun. I went with some buddies and went to the Lions game on Sunday. So yeah. Pretty busy on this end. How did you shake out after Friday?
I mean, everything was good, just busy, and then I'm getting this this little cold right now.
Jeez.
It's an annoying hack.
Maybe we should have kicked you off this one. Look at this one. Well, he'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But with all that being said, it is Monday. We're back again. We are concluding the year almost. You know, we're about to be in November. We're recording this podcast a couple days before Halloween. So it'll be November before we know it, and then it'll be December, and then the year will be up. And, we always like to, at the year end, kind of talk about a couple things that, maybe some people are thinking about towards the end of the year. And, this one, kind of tailored around the lines of, cost of living. Like, if you are living paycheck to paycheck, which a lot of people seem to be nowadays, and the reason why I bring that up when I say cost of living is, things have gone up over the last couple of years. We've talked about inflation, interest rates, all these things over the last, several years of podcasts too. And, we have had some people, even just friends, family, or other people we were talking about it. A lot of common themes is like living the paycheck to paycheck. Even if you're making as a household income, in the six figures, you might still be living paycheck to paycheck. That, back in the day, or, however you want to say it, that might have or may have seemed like a lot of money. It still is a lot of money, but it might not feel as strong nowadays because we have people in the six-figure realm, living paycheck to paycheck. And, if you are in that category, we kind of wanted to talk today about, okay, well, what kind of happens for if you lost that income, if you lost your job, or if big expenses came up, or something, maybe a medical emergency or a big home improvement that had to be done, replacing the furnace or a roof, something bad happened, and you got to spend some extra cash, and you're already living paycheck to paycheck, right? So kind of a bulk of all this, but we'll kind of start with the, if you lose your job situation. And it's really if you lose that income. Right. Obviously, the easy answer is, well, you got to try and get a new job, as soon as possible, of course. But that's why we kind of wanted to talk about it, in near the end of the year here, because, we've also seen some struggles in the job market.
Yeah, it's
recently.
starting to tighten up a little.
And so it's becoming maybe a little bit of a problem if that did happen. So, I guess, I'll toss it over to you. I've spoke a little bit today. So, if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you lose your job, what are some of the things that maybe you need to consider, or some of the things you need to focus on? And it might be not when that happens, right? A lot of the time you need to be proactive. So maybe we go back to the proactive side and, in preparation? Not like you ever want to plan for losing your job, of course, but what are maybe some of the things you should look out for or plan for in case that did happen?
Yeah, that could be a scary time, right? If you're just able to pay your bills now with maybe one income or a dual income, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you lose your job, you lose your paycheck, maybe no severance, then really, how do bills, get paid at the end of the day? And before we jump into that, I think one thing everybody should really, take a look at is, as inflation has been making things more expensive, you might have had certain things you like to do or buy and all that kind of stuff, based on your income. And if those things now are 10% or 20% or 30% higher all of a sudden, and you haven't really made any changes in your life and your income really hasn't kept, pace with those higher costs, it might be time to take a look at, what you're spending your money on and maybe cutting back on, some of those types of things, because I see that a lot. It's called lifestyle creep. The more you make, a lot of times the more you spend, but ultimately that inflation that's happened over the last couple of years, you feel it when you fill your gas tank, when you pay your insurances, when you're at the grocery store. If you haven't really taken a look at, where is my cash outflowing, you might be setting yourself up for a trap of you haven't really changed your lifestyle. And now maybe you're not saving what you used to. Maybe you're taking on some debts and justifying them and saying, oh, okay, it's just is what it is. I'll have to pay the interest. So I think it's a good time, at the end of the year to kind of take a look at your spending, kind of see where everything is going. I think it's pretty difficult. I think there's only one solution really to preparing for a job loss. Nobody goes to work every day, hopefully, worrying, am I going to have a job tomorrow? And if that is your situation, there's probably a lot of additional steps I would recommend. But if you're just, pretty happy at work and everything's going pretty good and you just get, part of being unlucky and you get part of a layoff or something like that, how do you prepare for that? I mean, the first thing is, I believe that work already had to be done. And that's, we've talked about this in length. That's the emergency funds.
Yeah. And that's why everybody needs an emergency fund. So again, that's the piece of the proactive. This would be, even if you're not thinking this way, right? You're not planning for a job loss. That's not what you plan for. You still need to have an emergency fund because that is exactly what it's for in the case of emergency. And that's why when I started this podcast, it's even though we're kind of focusing on, okay, what would happen if you lose your job, but emergency funds are also in the case of emergency. It might not be a job loss that is the emergency. It might be something else. It might be a health scare or something happens with the house or a car or something. You got to go out and you got to fix things. You got to do things. All those things are considered, emergencies. And that's why you need an emergency fund. So if you are living paycheck to paycheck and you don't have an emergency fund or that hasn't been a focus, you really need to start considering that as soon as possible, right? We have a lot of conversations sometimes, especially with younger people, and I like their eagerness and want to try to get ahead. They want to invest. They want to do these things, but sometimes, they might be even over funding, retirement accounts or things of that nature in the beginning because they want to do that. But then we look at their liquidity, and if something happens, they'd kind of be in a tough situation where they'd have to take like a hardship withdrawal or a 401k loan or take money out of their investment accounts when that wasn't the plan, right? And that's because they might not have had a proper strategy in terms of what's the priority first and foremost. And first and foremost is you got to have an emergency fund for these situations. And that's why a lot of these things you can't really do as a reaction. You got to be doing these things proactively in case those things happen. That is exactly why they exist. losing a job would be one of those things. An emergency fund would give you the ample time to still run your life, pay your bills that you have to do in case that income was lost due to a job loss or because of higher expenses because something unfortunately happened where you needed to spend some of that down. That's what it's for. It gives you the time to then go find another job, figure out your situation. Maybe you need to lower expenses or something for the time being, but at least that emergency fund is there for that purpose, right?
Yeah, because cost of capital is expensive right now. I mean, if your only resort, if you need money, is, let's say, going to your IRA and pulling money out and paying penalty and taxes on it, that's an expensive cost of capital.
Yeah.
If your only option is, putting stuff on a credit card and, maybe paying 20% plus in interest, that's expensive capital at the end of the day. And there really isn't a lot of cheap options out there right now. So being prepared going into, any type of situation gives you more options. You still might have to do, one of those bad options, even no matter how prepared you are. But the more options you set yourself up with, it definitely should reduce some of your anxiety and stress during those situations.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of like the IRAs, many people forget what the purpose is of an IRA, an individual retirement account, just like 401ks. Yes, it's your money. If you need it in a crisis situation, you can take it out. But those funds are meant for retirement, right? It's we want to save, we want to do those things. You want to all those things are extremely important. But if you are ultimately kind of putting yourself in maybe a bad situation because you're almost overfunding those things, then if something happens, you don't have the capital to be able to withstand it and you have to go to those accounts. Well, that really probably wasn't the purpose of funding those accounts, right? I mean, if you look at it, think about it this way. If you have funded an IRA, and you put $10,000 in it, and even if if you're in a 15-20% tax bracket and you had to strip that money out because of an emergency, even if your account went up 15-20% over that time frame, well, you're taking that out. The taxes are going to wipe that away. Plus, you probably have a penalty, which is an extra 10%. Now you're really kind of like in the negative, and you really didn't get a benefit ultimately if that was your situation. So, it's about understanding your situation and properly funding the right types of accounts so that you can get in those situations. I mean, it's even a lot of the conversations we have later in life with retirees, maybe they saved a lot of money and they did a great job saving throughout their career, but they only saved in one area, and they might have a problem later because maybe they want to retire early or they don't want to pay high taxes or all these things, but there's only one option to choose from. And it's kind of that same methodology, but back in the beginning of people's careers, or if you are living paycheck to paycheck, you got to have these different buckets of money, like an emergency fund, like non-retirement assets, bank accounts, brokerage accounts, things of that nature, to utilize in case those things happen. Those are the accounts that maybe you would go to first for that reason, because that's what they're there for. And that's part of the proactive nature, because if you don't do that and you don't have an emergency fund, you don't have these things, really your only option besides taking money out of retirement accounts or other things that you don't really want to would be incurring debt.
Or just cutting costs significantly.
Which sometimes isn't an option, right?
Yeah.
If you are living paycheck to paycheck and most of it is fixed bills, mortgage, rent, car payments, lease payments, insurances, things that you need, and then your needs like groceries, food, water, shelter, clothing, etc. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, well, then you might not be able to necessarily cut costs to the point where it would help your loss of paycheck, right? You may be able to cut some fun things, right? Travel, hobbies, some of that stuff you can cut out, but it might not be enough, to make up the loss of the income, right? And then you're still kind of in a dire situation. And that's when people incur debt, right? They have credit card debt. Maybe they have to go to the bank and take out a loan or a personal loan and things which you don't want to do, if you don't have to. So that's why, when we talk about, living paycheck to paycheck, you really have to try to look at your cash flow. We talk about cash flow so frequently in meetings and also on this podcast, but that is why we hammer that term cash flow so often. And it's because of how important it truly is for your financial health. It's not that you have to do this extreme budget and go through every single line item. If you're in a dire situation, you might have to get to that point, but you don't have to do that. It's just having a fair understanding of what is coming in and what is going out, and appropriately analyzing those things, and then saying, okay, with what's coming in, what's going out, what can be cut in case of an emergency, or with what is extra, right? Your extra cash flow, the money that you're maybe saving into banks, retirement accounts, cash accounts, etc. Are we appropriately allocating the right amount into those accounts to have an emergency fund, have liquidity, save for retirement, right? Those next extra things, paying down debt, maybe, right? It could be another one. But that's some of the issues that I see. And one thing about debt too, if you are living paycheck to paycheck, and some of that extra money has been utilized to pay down debt because you want that debt gone. Yes, again, of course, we want to do that. We want to get the debt paid down. You want to do those things, and those are good strategies. But if you're utilizing extra cash flow to do that, and it's hurting your liquidity, you still have to have a sense of, okay, yes, I want to focus on paying down the debt. I want to do those things. But you still, first and foremost, you got to have an emergency fund in case something happens, right? Because if you have no emergency fund and you're using all that extra funds that could be allocated towards that to pay down debt, yeah, that's a good thing. You're paying down debt, but that money is still going out and you really can't get it back. And if it hurts you in this type of situation, well, then you're just going to end up incurring more debt anyway.
At some point,
right? So that's one of the first things to look at. And when it comes to living paycheck to paycheck, it is all about balancing cash flow.
And I know something I've always done, early on. I don't know why I do it, but, it's just living below my means. A lot of people do live paycheck to paycheck because of their wants, not their needs. So for me, even in my financial plan, if you ever look at it, I estimate about 50% of my income. So I know how much I make, but when I'm looking at cash flow, I'm looking at how much I want to save. I know what my expenses are, and I base everything off about 50% of the income I actually am receiving, so that if the market goes way down, I could still afford to pay my employees. I can still save money. I can still live my life and all that. And then if the year turns out to be good, which normally it does, then you just have extra surplus, kind of in the plan and at the end of the year. So, and that's sometimes hard when you've established a lifestyle already to go back and change that, but it's really never too late of just looking at, what am I spending my money on? I'll give you an example. A lot of people in New York City, they spend I think it's close to 70 or 80% of their income on their housing because it's very expensive. It's expensive city to live in. But when you think about that, man, 70% of your income just on housing, that doesn't leave you a lot for, all these other things you got to really take care of. So, and that's more of an extreme situation because of the expenses. But no matter where you live and how much you make, that's always a relative thing. I mean, how you got to have housing, but how much of your, total income is that, eating into? You could definitely, always do less, move into a less desirable area for a period of time so that you can, get yourself financially where you want, and then, start making moves to where you want to be.
Yeah. It's a good point to make, because we've talked about a couple topics like this in the past, like being honest, with yourself, being transparent with yourself, right? Which is all relates to paying yourself first and all these things. But the lifestyle creep is a big one.
It's real.
It's definitely real. And when you are honest with yourself, you can normally find the reason and hopefully make a change to better your situation. But a lot of the time, Not all the time. We totally understand that there are some people that are in situations they're doing everything they can, but they have a family. Things are expensive, and they're doing everything they can, but they are truly living paycheck to paycheck. That is something that's going on, and we totally understand that. But we also see a lot of the time that when we talk about these things with people, a lot of the time they're not really living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of that necessity is easily affordable, and a lot of that living paycheck to paycheck in their mind are necessities in their mind that are not true necessities. They're wants. And those wants turn into, oh no, I need those things. Well, that's not being honest with yourself. A lot of the time those needs are, like I said, wants, and you have to be honest with yourself on what those actually are. Because if you have that mindset and you keep creeping up, even if you're making more money and you get a promotion and all these things, and you just keep creeping up your expenses with your income, eventually in times like high inflation where things cost more money, or maybe in times of an emergency, your lifestyle might creep past your income, and then you're in a negative situation. And then you go, well, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, when in reality, no, you just, last time you redid your car lease, you got a more expensive car because you were making more money. Or you bought a new house, or you went to a new place to rent because you were making more money, and I can afford it. Yeah, those are good things. You should be treating yourself in that regard if you are making more money and those things, but you need to make sure that it stays in line with those expectations of, okay, if something happened, what's my plan? Because if your plan is just, I'm going to keep working and I'll just keep spending more money, with that, at some point, that will catch up to you. It will. And we've seen it happen a lot of times. So that's, again, it's all about being honest with yourself, understanding your situation, and having a plan if that does go awry, and looking at what you're spending your money on and really determining what is actually true necessities and what are wants, because that's a big piece of cash flow. That gray area, which is the fun, the variable expenses, the hobbies, the excessive things, that's that area that a lot of people don't want to look at or don't like to look at it, because maybe they even know the answer themselves before they dive into it, right? But one of the other things you can work on if you are living paycheck to paycheck, reducing expenses and it's things of looking at
get a second job.
You can make more money. Obviously, making more money or spending less money, those both work in unison. Obviously, again, that's not always the best option, or
might not feel the best.
No, but it might have to be for temporary, or finding a new job that you maybe could earn more money in, right? But there are things that you can look at from a cash flow perspective, from a high level, where just making sure that you're staying in line. Insurances have gone up a lot recently. Making sure that you have the appropriate insurance coverage, like for your home, auto, those things, right? It's not going to that and reducing it to expose yourself to liability, unwanted or unneeded liability, because you don't want that either. But, shopping that out could be something that saves you a couple bucks here and there. Looking at the subscriptions, looking at those fixed bills that you have and seeing if there's any room for wiggle room, right? Interest rates are starting to go down. Maybe you had to, at the time, maybe a car or a house or something is financed at higher rates, even maybe other debts out there, and you might be able to, refinance those things now, to maybe stretch out the payment longer or the term longer, just to lower those bills. I mean, that might be something you have to look at, and you can look at those things. And it's just, again, about kind of staying on track with those and being honest and actually, trying to look at them, right? If you just put things in place and just let them ride, there is, that is kind of still not being honest with yourself, because you do have to monitor those things to make sure that they're still in line with putting yourself in the best financial position that you can. And looking at those things off, I mean, we shop out, insurances. We look at those things, frequently to see if there's ways that we can improve, even ourselves. Because those are important practices to have, to run, your financial health. Because, looking at your household, from a financial aspect, it is kind of like running a mini business, right? Your household is like a mini business, right? You have income, you have expenses, you have liabilities, right? You have risk, and you have to monitor those things to make sure that your health of your business, your house, is running appropriately and effectively. And it really all does come down to cash flow. And some people out there that are, living paycheck to paycheck, that's where I plead for the honesty, looking at your situation and being honest with yourself on what actually could be reduced if those things are, and you're getting that lifestyle creep, or things have just crept up because of inflation. It's looking at maybe, okay, how can we, draw back maybe some of these things to ensure that we are still saving for the emergency fund. We have liquidity. We have those things, because those things are going to be extremely important, if you do lose your job.
Yeah, I mean, let's switch gears a little. We're talking about more things. I think you're talking about preparing if that happens. Let's just talk a little about what we would do if that happens. So let's just say you're not in a great financial position. Maybe you don't have all the emergency funds you would like and all that. And then, someone loses a job, and now all of a sudden, you lose the income. That's probably a pretty scary feeling. I know, I felt that a couple times, with my wife. She carried the health insurance for our family. She had a salary. I was a business owner. We had that happen to us a couple times. Mm-hmm. And each time that happened to her, we reacted very, very similarly. I know one of the first things I do, is have a conversation, be real conversation, about what's going to be happening over the next couple months. Because we're talking about a pretty temporary situation. You're not going to lose your job and, not be able to get something pretty quickly. I mean, you're looking at like a 3 to 4 month span of time before maybe a paycheck, starts kicking in. Mm-hmm. So I think it's first having that conversation, if you're married, with your spouse, and saying, hey, look, these next 3 months, they're not going to be fun. We need to buckle up. We need to, just reduce all of our spending, looking at any spending that's unnecessary. And I know I've even, way back in the day went as far as, cutting, what some people might think are, necessary costs, cutting those and just saying, hey, let's get down to the bare bones and let's eke this thing through. So, having a conversation with the spouse, that communication being open and on the same page. If you're not having that, there's going to be a lot of additional stress in that household. The person that's keeping the job, might even kind of look down at the other person potentially. So the communication, the teamwork about, hey, we're going to get through this. It's going to be tough, but let's get it done. I think that's the very first thing, that should get done, is having that conversation, maybe reducing expenses. But more importantly, it's get going. Don't sit around feeling sorry for yourself. Oh, I lost my job. I was so good. You don't have time for that. If you don't have an emergency fund, you don't have time to feel sorry for yourself. So, getting your resume, up to date, getting it posted. The very first thing I would do is, reach out to your community, your family, your friends, maybe business relationships you created through your job, and be super proactive. I mean, making a call a day and putting your resume out there on one of those sites, that's not enough. If you're just sitting there waiting for something to happen for you, it's going to take longer. Bottom line. So, it's doing the research, finding companies that you would be open for working, seeing if they have job openings, proactively reaching out while you're in the interview process, being, more aggressive, not just sitting there waiting for their timelines. It's being proactive, showing them, that you want the job, following up with an email saying, hey, I really like this job opportunity. I'm very excited, in having the proper follow through so that maybe your resume, rides up, into the final list. But, I think it's all about having the hooks in the water. If you have one hook in the water and you're fishing, maybe you catch a fish, maybe you don't. If you have 10, 20 hooks out there, your odds are you're going to catch a fish much faster.
Yeah, I think the network piece of that would be the first thing. Don't obviously it might be an emotional time, it might be a stressful time, and it's not something that if you did get laid off or lose your job, it's not something that maybe you're proud of, but you have to maybe swallow a little bit of that pride and reach out to your network, right? That's the first thing. You can even go as far as reaching out to staffing companies. I mean, there's companies out there that their job is to place people, into companies. That's their job. So reaching out there, and getting your resume to them and saying, hey, this is what I do. I'm open to all these different opportunities. What do you guys have anything available? Or do you have companies that you're working with that maybe, I could be placed in, but the network, right? Friends, family, business partners or ex-employees that you've worked with or other companies in the past that people work there, reaching out to those people. Definitely first and foremost, utilizing platforms like LinkedIn. I know I've seen a lot of posts on LinkedIn. We're pretty active on LinkedIn. I've seen, posts about, hey, just people announce, hey, I was laid off from my job, yesterday, I'm blah, 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 give your whole description, post your resume on there, and, maybe someone will like and share it or repost it. And then it goes, kind of viral. And then, you got a lot of people looking at it. And you might get a lot of people reach out to you on there. I've seen, a lot of success stories like that too. But definitely, going and doing something, and getting to work on it is extremely important. But yeah, having that communication with your spouse, those are important things. Like those are good practices to have, is having a plan. Okay, if it happens, you got to have that sit down conversation. Here's what we're going to do. You got to have a plan. This is what's going to happen. We might have to reduce this for the time being. We might need to spend down some cash for the time being. Those things, maybe that's the plan. And then, if that's not enough, you might have to look at other things. If you have two spouses working and you have, the other spouse, and you guys have been saving for retirement, you have money in 401ks, you might have to look at taking a 401k loan from the active spouse that's still working at that employer. That's something to get cash on hand if you really, truly need it. Again, I wouldn't go there first. Try your best to
do the hard work first.
Do the hard work first. But there are levers that can be pulled. Again, we don't want to incur debt. We don't want to just take a 401k loan because that's the easy route and that's going to give us cash, right now to help withstand us. I would say do the hard things first, which might be taking some of those liberties away, some of the, the wants that you have and reducing those and kind of just buckling down and getting that done, but those are things that you can look at.
And it's temporary. I'm telling you, it doesn't feel good while it's happening, but you'll forget all about it in a couple months. Once everything settles and everything's good again, you won't even remember that time period.
But I think those are really the key things to look at is, again, you got to have the outreach. You got to be, when I say proactive this time, I don't mean how we were speaking before. I mean, you got to be proactive if it does happen. You got to be proactive in the ways of like we're talking, going right away to the job market, reaching out to companies, reaching out to staffing, reaching out to your network, friends, family, etc., and start placing those nets out there and,
treating it like it's your full-time job.
Which it would be at that point.
Yeah, no half-assing it and just, spending 30 minutes a day. Oh, I couldn't find anything. It's like you can find stuff, trust me.
And it's just about having that plan. And sometimes, you're not planning to lose your job, but you might have to create a little bit of a plan if it did happen and now it's happened. You got to create a little temporary plan for the next couple months and look at expenses, look at, what's going on, look at the assets that you do have out there. And if, in a situation where I am out of a job for a little while, looking at filing for unemployment, all these different factors, that's another thing you can do. But again, that might be the easy route, right? Where you just go, okay, I'm going to just spend down the bank. I'm going to go take a 401k loan. I'm going to file for unemployment. I'm going to do those things. Those things are available to you and you can use them as tools, but I would focus again more on the first and foremost, which is going back out there, reaching out, getting the network and getting it done. And if you have that honest conversation with yourself and your spouse, you can get through those times and, it's going to be a tough time, but you can get through it and take everything that we said earlier about being proactive. That's the best thing, is if you can do that beforehand and just have a plan, have a strategy in case, God forbid, that did happen and you do lose your job, that you already have a plan in place. But if it does happen and you have to be reactive, be honest with yourself, be communicative with your family, with your spouse, and get going on the next phase and just know that it'll be temporary and you'll get back on your feet. Stay positive. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you all soon. Ryan Kuss, President and Financial Planner. Alexander Dinzer, Managing Director and Financial Planner. Andrew Henricks, Financial Planner. Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Tax planning services offered by Horizon Advisors. Tax and accounting services provided by Horizon Advisors CPA. Cetera Advisor Networks does not provide tax nor accounting services. For a comprehensive review of your personal situation, always consult with a tax or legal advisor. Neither Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice. The views stated in this podcast are not necessarily the opinion of Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities. Due to volatility within the markets, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable. However, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Investors cannot invest directly in indexes. The performance of any index is not indicative of the performance of any investment and does not take into account the effects of inflation and the fees and expenses associated with investing. A diversified portfolio does not assure a profit or protect against loss in a declining market. All investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will be successful. Distributions from traditional IRAs and employer-sponsored retirement plans are taxed as ordinary income and, if taken prior to reaching age 59.5, may be subject to an additional 10% IRS tax penalty. Converting from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. A Roth IRA offers tax-free withdrawals on taxable contributions. To qualify for the tax-free and penalty-free withdrawal of earnings, a Roth IRA must be in place for at least 5 tax years, and the distribution must take place after age 59.5 or due to death, disability, or a first-time home purchase, up to a $10,000 lifetime maximum. Depending on state law, Roth IRA distributions may be subject to state taxes. Investing in mutual funds is subject to risk and loss of principal. There is no assurance or certainty that any investment strategy will be successful in meeting its objectives. Exchange-traded fund and mutual funds are sold by prospectus only. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, and charges and expenses of the mutual fund or ETF carefully before investing. The prospectus contains this and other information about the product. Contact Alexander Dinzer at 5455 Corporate Drive, Suite 306, Troy, Michigan, 48098 or 248-265-6662 to obtain a prospectus, which should be read carefully before investing or sending money. Horizon Advisors, 5455 Corporate Drive, Suite 306, Michigan, 48098.